the distortion around that. Like, even as you say, feminine energy, I'm feeling that paradigm of like, that's still something outside of me. That's still
Mm,
something other than my essence.
mm, mm.
That's Venus razor blades and shampoo and all this commercial whatever. Um, when you're in that men's retreat, and you were also taking me back to the Rebel Wisdom men's retreat long time ago, but that same sense of like looseness, there's kind of like a level of freedom and being ourselves that we're not always able to have in all male groups. And part of that is because at frequent junctures, we've had to basically become really, really violent towards one another, you know, either in individual journeys or in collective journeys. And, you know, we still hold some of that. There's also all kinds of competition dynamics. There's all these
Mm.
ways in which we don't feel fully like the men around us are actually in support of us, because there's all this competition socially, competition in relationship to women. And so there's something about insulating that space of like, let's get all the brothers and the cousins and the, you know, the men and go out in the woods and just be around a fire and really go deeper and deeper and let the layers fall away until we just have that, like, I'm being profoundly me and you're being profoundly you, and there's a simplicity to it, and we're like meeting each other in it.
Mm. Yeah.
um and then that feminine spirit is equally like what have the wisdom traditions, what have the esoteric traditions, what have the monastic, you know, Christian traditions, what is the essential flame that all of those things have been guarding? What is it that's really going on when all of those men who are deeply devoted to this kind of path come together? There's a creative spirit there.
Mm.
And, you know, just kind of skirting it off into more Christian theology, because I'm reading and studying a lot right now. Like, Jesus Christ is articulated as the king figure. He's articulated as like a core expression of the king archetype in Western culture and global culture. There are others as well, but, you know, he's pretty up there. And what is the core characteristic of him? Well, he's a man who's deeply in touch with the feminine aspect of divinity, which is how he's able to have those qualities of interactions. And so for me, it's like I can really feel the king and the divine feminine and the goddess, like those actually, like, we don't have a king if he's not in touch with that. That is where his kingship, his like his true sovereign power comes from, the fact that he's humbly, you know, acutely, sensitively in relationship to a greater wisdom. And so you have, what is it, King Arthur and Lady of the Water, you know, she's the one who presents him with the sword. There's always this sense that the king has to like go out and have this meeting with
Yeah.
the
And
divine.
has, yeah, and has to be in right relationship with that energy. Like that's the essence of the, like the shadow king is the one who has lost, who's out of integrity with the feminine, right? I mean, that's the fundamental quality of the shadow, the king in shadow. And yeah, I think the depth, like I see the polarity, like as we become more capable of being with the feminine, either internally or externally, we become more capable of inhabiting the masculine as well. Like we stretch both wider. And if we can't have one without the other, and like it's yeah, and it, but what you said about like what, just going back to what you said earlier about like when men come together, there's so often that layer of that initial layer of discomfort or competition or wariness or unease or fear. I mean, I've seen that as well in many men's groups. In the Thomas Hubel work, it was really clear at first, but it also doesn't take, I mean, obviously for some, depending on our history, for some of us it takes longer than others to kind of step out of that posture, or to kind of relax the defenses or the habitual responses. But it happens kind of quite, it can happen quite fast as well. It doesn't have to be a long process, while honoring that for some men it is a long process.
That's where like having an elder is like, I don't know if this is true for you, but in my own experience as a younger man who, you know, at various times has been, you know, when I've been like wrapped up in my own process in a way that's preventing me from being able to fully land in where I am. When there is you know, a man who's holding some of that elder energy for me, it's just like I can zone in on him, and I just I regulate to his frequency. Like I come to his level of just like seen it all, like calm wisdom, and I don't need to have like necessarily fully landed that myself in that moment. If there is a man there who's kind of just fully resting in his kind of kingly elder frequency.
Yeah, it's really powerful to hear that. I mean, I think of like in our Sangha, like Thomas Hubel sitting there with 200, 400 people. Everybody is doing that in a way. He's holding the whole space and holding it solidly enough that we're allowing the most horrendous traumas to come into the room and be held without, I mean, there's a lot of energy sometimes, but the field is not going to crack and fragment, which is what can happen if you make a space for that level of trauma material to surface. So it takes that elder or that facilitator. And I'm thinking back today at work to how, like, sometimes I can embody that at work, but sometimes I get triggered and I'm not. I'm thinking of an incident earlier today where actually I could have done with more of that, seen it all, standing steadfast energy rather than getting wobbled by criticism. And I it's useful to remember, like, even in our own, like you was talking about as a kind of younger man looking for the elder. I mean, I'm another generation up, so I'm more on the threshold of maybe not being an elder just yet, but I'm in a position even at work where I should be the man that others are orienting towards. But I can also recognize that I need to also cultivate that solidity so that I can be that beacon in a way. And I'm not always, sometimes I am, but not always, you know, because I can have a part that gets triggered. And that's a good time to not say or do anything, actually. Just wait until I'm interacting from a more aligned place. But it's all a practice ground, isn't it?
Yeah. And well, what it brings up for me is the felt reality I've had a number of times, and also seen voiced in one other very, very good men's brotherhood, is that the presence of this kind of wisdom collective field that you're choosing to really participate in becomes this extra like energy center in your awareness. And so I had a conversation yesterday with a guy who, you know, at some junctures, very unclear whether it was due to my energy or his, like I was really quite struggling to fully be there and be with him and to show up. And then I sort of remembered the resonant man, not the initiative, but the spirit of the resonant man. And like, then it was like, oh, this like third force came in. And it was like, I don't need to be at 100%, because if I'm in relationship with the resonant man, then it kind of becomes this triangulation, and I'm able to kind of be, I guess we're bereft of words here, because like it's not so much that I'm trying to be my elder, but it's like I'm trying to be my resonant man, to be of service to wisdom in that moment. And I don't think this stuff has a, very delineated boundaries. I think it's very fluid. And so you will be an elder, or you'll be the wisdom keeper for various people you encounter, and others will not hold you in that way. But even now, like getting into my late 20s and starting to slowly realize like, oh, there's like an archetypal effect that I have on younger men. Like when I'm interacting with guys 18, 19, there's a difference because of the journey that I've been on and the life that I've lived. That means actually like I hold a degree of, I don't know, responsibility showing up in that that's different from if I was just the same age as them.
Yeah, what you said about how the field, like being in a field like the Resonant Man or another community, is a resource that actually it's not just about what happens during that hour and a half or 2 hour session. I mean, that can be very powerful, but it's actually that you're then accompanied by that resource, or that resource is available throughout the rest of the week. That's very real, and not something, until you've experienced this work, it's not something that's obvious, I don't think. But as you deepen into it and it becomes more integrated into the fabric of your life, it's definitely something you can kind of pull on, especially in moments of challenge or uncertainty. And you have a kind of it's like an expanded not even, it's not just a tool set, it's not just like you have certain techniques or practices, it's a kind of feeling of energetic support or resource that, as you say, can help us then connect with that, whether it's the third force coming in or our own, like in IFS terms you'd say like self leadership. Like we can feel all our parts vying for the controls, but then we kind of click back into that self perspective with a capital S. And these kinds of fields, I think, are really conduits or scaffoldings maybe that help us connect with self. We just come into alignment with self more easily in these spaces. That's the whole point, really. And that's not, as I say, something that just happens in the hour and a half. It's something that then becomes more and more natural and automatic almost.
Mm.
That's the transformation. It's being more often in alignment with yourself rather than in a reactive part.
Yeah, and what becomes possible from that place is a fascinating infinite horizon, really. I wonder, like, having explored a little bit around the goddess, the divine feminine, how that exists between men. I'm thinking about how we might talk a little bit to the downloading of your authentic future. Maybe that's too expansive for today, but also I feel like we could do a little lost lost exploration around that. And I also just wanted to note, like, can we acknowledge as men that, and human beings, that we are co-regulators? Like
Yeah,
that's our essential nature. So as much as this is the resonant man is pointing to an evolutionary possibility, we're also just acknowledging like all men, all people are resonant beings. Our very existence, the very nature of a human being is to be in resonant co-relationality from, all of the attachment literature, Gabor Mate's stuff, like from the very beginning, our sense of reality is shaped by who we're sharing space with. So can we first acknowledge that, and then can we like tune that baby up?
Yeah, that is in a way the core, isn't it? Like, because what I've come to recognize is that, as cultures, we've become so fragmented and so traumatized, essentially. Like, even though we may not even feel that traumatized, we're swimming in this traumatized sea, that we don't have that many opportunities to co-regulate. I mean, if we're lucky, we might have a supportive family or friendship group that we feel relaxed around, but it's not a given. And we might spend a lot of our time in an environment like the workplace that is far from offering us that co-regulation. We might not find, we might not always be guaranteed of co-regulation in our home environment or our family environment or where we live. It's often quite hard to find, and we might find that at different times we need a different kind of type of co-regulation. And there's something about having a consistent place where we can go, same time, same place, same people, but obviously there'll be some coming and going, but there's a kind of core of people who we're connected with, that it becomes an amazing resource. Even just stepping into the space, after a while your whole system relaxes. Even if you don't say anything, if you're just listening, it's like nervous systems all sync up, like tree roots or like a mycelium. Like, it becomes a kind of, you become part of like an almost larger organism. And there's something, I think, in the human, like you've just pointed to, in our human system, that actually loves that and needs that. Like, we need to be in a group of say a safe, trusting, supportive relational field. Like, we need that. And I mean, we can romanticize this, but it is like being in a tribe. Like, it's like being in a kind of almost like primal society where we all feel like we're part of one organism. And that can sound like it would be a hindrance to individuality or a kind of leveling off in some way, but in my experience is the total opposite, that when we're in that safe collective field, we actually become more of who we are.
Yeah.
And we see each other more clearly, paradoxically. So we through that co-regulation, we become more sharply defined. Our unique signature becomes sort of more, we express our unique signature more easily, and people can receive it and perceive that signature more easily in that kind of coherent field. And just stepping into it is resourcing, and you just come away feeling better. It's really very simple, actually, at the most basic level. Even if you don't say very much, there's power in that we managed to somehow forget about, or have dismantled, or maybe has been rather deliberately undermined, but which we can reclaim.
It's a huge need. And just to like build upon that with a view towards, what does it mean to realize our authentic future? Maybe one way of approaching that is, when I find enough spaces of the quality you describe where I can really show up as me, and then I step out into the world more from that place, and the world dynamically reflects back and shows me new possibilities, new doorways, new choices. is my authentic future in a way is simply what will transpire when I can show up in the world as me more, which is sounds
Exactly.
simple and it's absolutely huge.
Yeah. Yeah. I love what you just said, because I I think for me, one of the core realizations of my own path in recent years has been like I would articulate it as becoming more of who I really am. And that's like, what does that mean? Like, if I'd said that, like, until a few years ago, that would have been a meaningless statement to me. Like, well, I'm who I am. Like, what do you mean who you really are? Like, who are you then? Like, just sort of would be a nonsensical statement. But I think what has become more apparent to me is the distinction between the conditioned layers, the ancestral layers, the inheritance, the cultural conditioning, how thick so much of this is, how much of my internal psychological architecture is kind of preloaded by the culture, by ancestral uh, energies, by all kinds of factors that aren't necessarily essentially me. And the task of then really recognizing when that conditioning is in charge, or when some fragmented, traumatized part of me is in charge, as opposed to, as I was saying earlier, like the self, like the soul, the more authentic stream. Like, which energy am I running? Am I running essentially the energy of the past, which is interpreting a current situation through the lens of the past, and therefore going into a reactive cycle which will create more of the past? Or am I able to witness that process, and by witnessing it, allow a different energy to flow, or a different possibility to open, which is authentic, as opposed to a reenactment of something that's already happened? And that's another way, I think, of saying the same thing as you. Like, I've got to meet my authentic, I can only meet my authentic future when I'm more fully myself, when I'm more fully aligned to my essence, to my soul, when I'm taking guidance from that deeper place. Otherwise, I'm just recreating. Even what I think I want is coming from the
Oh.
lack. And I can really get myself into a loop that can go on a very
You're
long
hitting me
time.
with so many things that I'm just like feeling it loud, like, oh yeah, that's totally me. Like I
Yeah.
resonate
Well,
with
I
all
think it,
these
I
like
think, yeah.
struggles. Yeah.
Yeah. And and it becomes much easier to see these patterns when we observe other people, like when other men, like when we're in a place where we can be transparent about our struggles and our aspirations and our frustrations and our blocks and our hopes and our gifts, like all of these, when we can bring all of what is normally not really the topic of polite conversation, when we can bring all of that stuff into the space, we kind of experience like an exponential increase in our self-awareness, as well as our awareness of others, because we see reflections of ourselves in the other men. Like, we see parts of ourselves reflected back to us very clearly. And we get these moments of instant clarity where we realize, I do that. I do what he's talking about. Oh my God, like, or I see someone else's pattern so clearly, and in the seeing of their pattern, I learn something about another pattern that I carry that's actually a different pattern but has a similar um, quality to it, even though it may be manifesting very differently in the outer light, in my outer circumstances. It's actually a very similar kind of signature. And so it's in that kind of field that we can like make really quick, even though I'm not like a quick fix merchant, I do think in these spaces we can make quite rapid progress in terms of recognizing where we're going unconscious, where we're acting out of habitual patterns, where we're acting out of trauma, and where we're able to be into the stream, the current, the Tao, the healing intelligence. Like, how can we align with that more often? And recognize we're going to fall off all the time. I'm still coming back to something I said to someone earlier today that I now regret. but I also sent them a follow-up by way of repair, because I realized I need to get back into the stream of the healing intelligence, not the trauma cycle. And especially as a leader, not to sort of lay my trauma on someone else, which is easy to do, to displace the discomfort under the guise of correcting someone, or, you know, it's a very subtle difference.
Yeah. It's it seems to me that that sort of matrix is all around us. It meets us at every level, whether we're in the position of the boss or the employee or the teacher or the student,
Yeah, or the husband or partner, or, you know,
wife, son, father.
yeah, it's just being anchored in that stream that's coming from that vertical, rather than acting out of the the unresolved past in the horizontal, like, to put it in more like mystical terms, like it's being in the stream of what's alive and relational and intelligent and emergent, rather than just doing the same old thing that we've been trained into to avoid pain. The two totally different movements, and we can alternate between one and the other even in the course of a single conversation. But it's first of all noticing when we're in one, when we feel in alignment or we feel out of alignment, and then constantly retrieving it, or like dancing back into it, like Tai Chi, like you would say, like, you know, there's a kind of fluidity that we can adopt and recognize we fall off all the time, get triggered, get upset, fall into depression. I mean, it's not like, I think it's so important on this path that we don't set up some kind of unrealistic idea that we're going to attain some sort of state beyond suffering. And like Thomas Hubel often reminds us in our deep like meditation, he says we're not meditating to get rid of anything or to achieve any state or to make our lives better. Like he says, you know, think about like mystics or high level, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but, you know, people in history who are like seriously high level mystical practitioners who had terrible lives. It's almost like, don't, you know, forget about trying to improve your life. Like, that's not what we're doing. We're trying to be more here for what's happening. That's very different than I'm trying to have if I meditate hard enough, life will go better for me. No, it's just like if I go to men's groups, life will get better for me. I mean, I think it, you know, generally will do for lots of reasons, but that's not if we go with that intention, that's not the essence of what we're doing. The essence of what we're doing is supporting each other to be more present to what is real right now. And that's a different frequency than I'm trying to improve myself. And that's why it's quite hard to market what we're doing. It's like, because it isn't like, even when I wrote in the newsletter, I was like, even as I wrote that sentence, we're not offering a quick fix, I was almost like, well, no one's going to come. Like, I should actually be putting like, do you want to master your sex life? Do you want to make loads of money? Do you want
mastery?
Exactly. Like, I mean, maybe that would get more, you know. But I thought, well, no. I mean, it's true that I have done men's groups that have given me big turning points, no doubt about it. I'm not, I mean, that's also true. But there's something here that's like your triumvirate of patience, faith, and I can't remember the third one, but
Gratitude.
gratitude. Yeah, like that's not a quick fix, but it's very strong and resourcing, and it, with application and patience, does lead to change, no doubt, and maturity. So I I'm big into the idea of like the authentic future being about starting from here. Like we can only get to the authentic future from being really here, because the getting to the future is in itself a trying not to be here, which is
Mhm.
trauma,
Mhm.
which is compounding the original trauma movement, which is getting this place is there's either too much, not enough, or I can't be here. Like if we're constantly looking to the future, we're in the same dynamic. It's like, and we interrupt that by being with what is very deeply. And then the future arrives. We're not chasing it. That's the move. That's the flip. And it's already here.
Yeah.
Like we're sitting here launching this initiative. We could have ideas about what a successful launch would look like. We could think about numbers. We could think about money. We could think about how much transformation occurs. Like we could have all kinds of ideas about outcomes that are all totally in our minds. They're just mental constructs. And we have this moment where we're enjoying the connection that we share. We're enjoying the permission we've given ourselves to explore these questions and just enjoy being in relation in a deeper way than is often the case between men. And that's already the authentic future right now. It's right here. It's not in the future anymore. Like here it is. I feel like better than when I started the call. Fantastic, even though nothing materially has changed, but there's a feeling of connection with that intelligence, that flow. We're not stuck in some kind of script.
Yeah, when you spoke about marketing, I almost felt like you can't sell truth. You can't sell love. Like
Yeah.
truth is what you're speaking to when you say it's not about making the thing better. It's about actually deeply coming into relationship with what is, which is intrinsically connective. And it strikes me that love is the absolute inverse of trauma: individual, collective, social, spiritual. Like all of the IFS, all of the different skills that we're cultivating in collective trauma healing, um, affording this place where the negative story can come and something can happen to it that doesn't like beat it down, but it dissolves it. It bring like the field of love within yourself has become so viscous, like lava, that whatever those kind of fragmentary, distortionary things that are coming, and no doubt many, many more to come, because lifetimes of baggage that we all are collectively sharing, but that those can literally just come down and be dissolved into that viscous kind of thick love energy that you're cultivating in relation to yourself, in relationship to the beauty of the world, in relationship to the goddess. Definitely that's going to be a part of it. And, you know, in relationship to one another, in relationship to other men, which is also a hugely radical notion to even articulate or attempt to stand in. But when we are in that, I think we can both attest that our entire material reality can undergo radical shifts, and things can just pop up and happen and flow in ways that control and planning don't seem to be able to afford. Which
Yeah.
is not to say we're not going to do planning, we're not going to do some work with objectives and visioning and in a more conventional sense, yes, but what is the ultimate principle? What are the ultimate principles that lie at the heart of this? What is it that actually produces that flame? So we're not just a bunch of guys, you know, looking at a cave wall together. We're actually looking at the fire, and the fire is alchemical. The fire gives warmth. The fire is transformative, and the fire reveals truths to us if we gaze,
Mm.
into it and we speak around it.
Mm. Yeah, and it's discovering the reality of a more participatory universe. Like we're less caught in a material construct and more participating in a kind of co-creation, an emergent process of living that is a different register from the kind of predominant headset that we're given to wear as humans. Like we're seeing through that and taking off the headset in a way and recognizing this like participatory quality in how reality arises. It's not happening to us as such. It's something that we are invested, or we are continually evoking in how we in the consciousness that we inhabit. And that's something about, for me, in the image of the fire, like there's this, I love that alchemical fire image. There's this kind of transformation, transmutation, a constant process of aliveness and like an energy that's just arising spontaneously. It's like it's not fixed. It's not like rigid, or we're not stuck or kind of moving through this like almost prison-like reality. There's a kind of aliveness, a possibility, and a kind of opening that that becomes a much more real and experiential when we allow ourselves to sort of shift our perception in this way. And it, again, it's something that happens when we come together and co-regulate in a group. We suddenly just, it's like when we see how limited we often are because we see other people stuck in their own limitations and kind of sharing them and like seeking our help to clear their visor a little bit. All of this just becomes almost self-evident. It's like we see when we see our limitations and we hold them reverentially and respectfully in a sort of shared field, they lose their power. That's the kind of essence of that's one of the mechanisms that I think we're invoking here, or we're bringing into motion. It's like by sharing these struggles that we have, by acknowledging where we can't see clearly, or where we're stuck, or where we're in a loop, or where we're in the same old pattern that we recognize, when we bring that into the shared field of awareness, in that space of being witnessed in a way without any advice, judgment, without all that commentary, just witnessed, that's when these things can start to dissolve. It's like that shared presence, shared awareness is the transformative agent that begins to work on each of us individually in a very intelligent, precise way. And we can then step out of those loops, those old scripts, and then that participatory quality in which is always there in reality, but which we're often just not able to really align with or flow with, that suddenly starts to come alive for us in a more tangible, actionable way.
Yeah, it's very, very moving to me what you're talking about there. because I've had direct experiences of precisely that, and just like the feeling of like receiving that gift, receiving that love. It's just like there's such a sense of like this is so good and I don't deserve it, but yeah, I'm receiving it, kind of thing. And I have a cousin who is 8 years older than me, and we only like reconnected as adults in the last maybe couple of years. And he's not really in a men's group, but he's been so interested in this like sense of the men's space and like those kinds of conversations, and we've been having those together and kind of have our own little men's developmental relationship between us. And just today, like getting to a place where that's kind of flowing through him back to me, and just feeling like that faith from him in the things that I'm struggling with, where I'm like, there's these things I want to do and I think about them all the time and I don't really know how to do them. For someone else, that ain't shit. As Lisa Norton always says, like, your thing, oh, I'm not even worried about your thing. Like, we're all super attached to our particular struggle, but when we can see it in the other man, especially through the eyes of love and truth, um, it's it's honored, but it's not taken to be so essential.
Yeah.
It's kind of a passing feature on the stage of life that is,
Mm.
can be subject to a change of scene at any time. And I think the more we're tuned into that, the more we can kind of sense, I can really feel this guy's in act. He's at the end of act 3, and there's a big change coming up in
Yeah.
act. And so I'm kind of being present to his character and his journey in a way that like senses and anticipates that and reads a little bit of the mythic unfoldment of his life. And we so need that from each other as well. Like we just need a little, like a half a teaspoon of faith
Yeah.
towards one another to be
Yeah.
sustained. Like we need hardly any of that medicine to be sustained, but
Mm.
when we don't have it and we get it, it is like, wow,
Mm.
I really, really needed that. And giving it is ultimately where that, I think, is the fountain of that, is to be able to give it to others as well.
Yeah. And then it circulates and it amplifies and it becomes a kind of living current that everyone in the group can sense and feel just by being present. Yeah.
Beyond the group, ultimately,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is this
Yeah.
isn't like me in relation to the men's group or even me in relation to my life. This is like me in relation to the fundamentals of reality. And if I truly give of that and I show up with that, it might not come back directly, but
Yeah.
it comes back around. And
Mm.
the dance of the resonant man is really a fractal or a hologram or a training ground for this bigger dance of life. Which is, the greatest mystery of all. So do you think we can sell that?
Hopefully, a couple more.
Was that a sellable?
I
was
think
that
I just think for the
was that a deliverable market value proposition?
I think it's like you've always said, it's the high fidelity signal is if for those who have ears to hear, it's that's it. This is us. This is what we believe, what we've experienced. We're not hamming, this is all real. And if people like not everyone's going to be able to receive the ping, but there will be some. There are already some. And I feel like I feel there's just something supremely valuable about us. I like what you said about knee deep and then walking waist neck deep. Like I like that analogy you used in your voice note the other day. Do you remember? You said
Well,
we're
I
like
remember the
knee.
analogy, but not the context.
You said something like we're knee deep with it, and we're
Ah,
gonna, yeah. Like I kind of agree, and I kind of feel like I
in the
haven't.
resonant man, we're knee deep in the resonant
Yeah,
man,
yeah, and I
maybe
feel
hip
I
deep.
I feel like the process between us and how this is the process, and of course we want, like, you know, people to come, and but we also, I think we also have to recognize that it has its own energy, and it will, the more faithful we are to that, and we share it and we broadcast it and we can create as much content as we can, I'm all for that. Like I think that's great, but ultimately it's like there's no trick, like you say, love and truth. You can't market love and truth. I feel like it will it will find its way through the signal we're sending out,
And
as always.
the animating spirit of the resonant man is such that the resonant man is gathering men unto him, under him, around him. And
I
so
love
it's
your biblical prepositions now starting to
they're creeping in, aren't they? But on some level, you and I are not responsible. We're not, it's not like we've created the resonant man and now we have to bring these men into it. It's more that we have downloaded the resonant man and landed the resonant man to some degree. But that same force that has drawn us together, that is drawing us to realize these things,
yeah.
is in its own time gathering the right people around who can kind of hold that, hold the crown, like the crown, the golden round
Mm,
exists between us to be held, to be
mm,
landed.
mm.
To make of us kings, to make of us resonant men, to make a kingdom
Totally. And we
worthy.
can trust that. We can trust that and just let it be what it wants to be, and express, serve it, and follow our inspiration to create the right content, and, to pulse it out and to be in service through our words and speech, and be channels for that spirit. But in a way, the outcome is outside of our control. I mean, completely outside. There's a deeper animating spirit that is really orchestrating this. And that's the beauty of the process, to really remember that and to really like live that and have this as an experience of that in a way that in some ways is very strong, to feel that energy when we speak about it and come together about it. It's like we both feel it very tangibly. And I don't always feel that in my day job. Like I sometimes do, or like I don't always feel that in the creative projects. I sometimes do, but I really feel it here. And like, so coming together to feel that and flow that frequency is really cool, because it also begins to infuse other areas of life, like having an experience of following the intelligence, as you say, of aiding the orchestration of something that wants to be born, that isn't our creation exactly, but that we just happen to be, it wants to come through us, which identified us as the channel, because for whatever reason we've been on the path, and it's, oh, okay, yeah, they'll do, okay, great, we're in, we're here to help, fantastic. And that's a different way of creating something. It's a very different energy than what I've been trained in, of like striving and struggling and kind of being very attached to what happens and very invested in my whole identity being, and then it doesn't happen, and then I feel diminished, or then it does happen, but it's not really quite what I thought it would be. And that's just, no, like I've spent 50 years almost doing that. Whereas this is like a real experience of what you kind of read about in books, like the Bible, like, what you read about in like books on creativity, and like,
The Holy Grail.
yeah, it's like, it's the idea that it's coming through us. I really feel that for this initiative. Even every meeting has a kind of quality of serendipity and energy. Like there's an excitement that is beyond my ideas of what this is. My ideas of what this is are being informed by this excitement. They're not generating it. The current is It's not like I've thought of all this. It's just happening. What it's your phrase, radical servants of the happening. I think that's I
I've
think
forgotten
resonant
that name for me.
resonant man, radical servants of the happening. I just feel that's the subline. Radical servant. I love that. Radical servant of the happening. It's just
I think
one of the coolest phrases I've heard in a long time.
that's very in line with our devotional
It's like, what is it?
unorthodox marketing agenda.
Yeah, it's like it sounds cool, but what does it mean? Like, what are you talking about? It's just, yeah, the happening. It's happening. It's the Tao. It's the ever unfolding Tao that cannot be named. You know, that's it. It's the happening. The happening. What is even the happening? It's a formless form. You know, what is it? What's actually happening? I don't know, but it's happening. It's happening now. I better go to bed soon. I'm quite tired, Jacob.
Yeah, please don't confuse the audience too much. Your Taoist riddles.
Too much Thomas Hubel.
Yeah, that's a unique current to be downloading at the intensity that you are. Beautiful day, beautiful conversation. Very pleased we
Yes,
did. Always a testament to the generator energy available when we tune in. Getting better every time.
I love that aspect of it. It doesn't feel like work. Like even when we've been talking for like hours now, like we haven't even noticed the time. It's just we could almost go on for more hours. I do actually want to go to bed now, but this is the thing. Is I always say that, and then an hour later I'm still talking because there is this animation here. There is a space that we're both speaking into that we've somehow evoked between us that is allowing something to land. And that's art. And you said it's a work of art. I loved how you wrote it's a work of art. I thought, wow, I would never say something like that because I wouldn't dare to. But I did think that was cool. I loved your ambition, your kind of the largeness of what you want to bring. I love that. I find that lifts me up. It makes me raise my own sights higher. But at the same time, it's not in a way that's attached, more just in a way that's welcoming the possibility of something unknown. So all of this is cool. It's fucking awesome. It's just great. It's great. It's great. It's really cool what we're doing. And if one great comment is great. It's nice to see that there's lots of people writing Substacks, but not so many who are actually trying to bring people together I mean, some are, but it's much easier to sit there just opining about the state of the world. Anyone can fucking do that, but we're trying to intervene in the grid. We're trying to create an acupuncture point energetically that will be helpful in its own scale. We're trying to actually get our hands in the energetic clay and do some helpful intervention as self-anointed resonant men. What else can we fucking do at this point on the planet? That's the best. It's the best and last hope.
Like some men are here to help build spaceships, and some men are here to help build spaceships.
Yeah.
And we are one of those two groups. So I love what's happening. I felt the whole rocket launch, those videos did excite something like profound in me. And also I could just feel it rippling through the field, like that sort of moon landing, like pure.
Is this a SpaceX?
It's a SpaceX rocket the size of a 13-story building tunneling out of the stratosphere.
Really?
Just like,
I haven't actually seen this. I need to watch this. This sounds
as it
amazing.
approaches very close to this tower, like this super precise, like candlestick stabilizer that they've installed just starts going like and the thing just comes from like rocketing into the stratosphere to like landing, and then these two chopsticks, it's called a chopstick landing, these basically it just lands in this bottomless stand, and these two chopsticks just catch it, and then it hangs in place, and it's just like Elon is he's dropping a lot of stuff right now, and that was visually the most, apart from seeing those robots, that was a big deal. So I think that we're doing the inner space. We're doing with inner space what Elon is doing with outer space in a way.
Mm.
And I think that to the extent we can kind of connect those a little bit aesthetically and associationally, there's going to be something really excited in the imagination of men. Because I can feel it. It just feels like something has really shifted from the first aesthetic to the second one, and no doubt it will unfold in new directions.
Yeah, I love the orbital imagery. It's very cool. Yeah.
Mysterious to me, very mysterious.
Cool, man. All right, I best jump off. That was
Yeah,
amazing.
good idea.
And I will, well, let's chat over the weekend and think about our more content. Let's just get the word out.